For 3 hours, the woman is trapped with the horse. They do everything to save the animal's life. Family activities are common throughout the world. Many families have different bonding activities based on the area of the world they're in and their interests. For some families, this involves board games. For others, the activities involve walking the dogs, swimming, or participating in some other sport. Whatever it is, the family bond is sacred and there's never expected to be any terror or danger of any kind. Family activities should be moments of laughter and happiness. This is the story of what started out as a family moment and quickly turned into a disaster. The Graham family had been riding horses for many years. Over time, they'd bred many different horses and were very comfortable with these gentle creatures. They taught their children to ride from a very young age and made sure they were adept at riding if they encountered dangerous territory. The Graham family lives in Melbourne, and the two main riders in the family are mother, Nicole, and daughter, Paris. It was a beautiful day and they decided to go for a walk. It was something they had done many times before, and as they saddled the horses, they didn't think much about the weather or weather conditions. They had a long week and the two decided that a long, pleasant ride would cure the week's stress. Nicole's horse was named Astro, and he was a beautiful 18-year-old stallion. Astro weighed about 78 stones or 495 pounds and was a show horse. He and Nicole had been through many competitions together, and the horse was considered agile and fast. Nicole trusted him when they were in the wild. She never felt afraid when she was riding Astro or even when they came across some dangerous situations. On this particular occasion, Nicole had no reason to think they'd be in danger. Although the mud was a little thick, they'd been in the woods a lot in the last few weeks. Nicole liked to believe the horse had a sixth sense. She was confident that Astro knew how deep the mud was and where it was good to walk. Nicole later admitted that she saw the mud, but as Astro didn't dodge it, she didn't think twice. All that changed the day they rode with Paris. Paris had a smaller horse, and the smaller horse wasn't as well trained as Astro. The two women were talking and suddenly Paris was in trouble. The small horse she was on started to sink in the mud, and quickly Nicole panicked as she felt the mud start to envelop her and realized that Astro was completely trapped. Nicole loved the horse, but her first instinct was to save her daughter. She staggered through the mud and reached for her daughter and the smaller horse's reins. Nicole didn't consider herself very strong, but at that moment she felt superhuman. Heart-pounding, she pulled her horse and daughter out of the mud and onto solid ground. She knew what could happen if they got stuck in quicksand. There were many stories about creatures that sank into the mud and couldn't get back. Nicole felt that she couldn't breathe and turned to Astro. The horse was making incredibly startled noises, and she knew she wouldn't be able to repeat that superhuman feat twice. However, all she could think about was the incredible things she and Astro had been through. The seawater was closing in on them, and the mud was becoming even more like quicksand by the moment. Nicole did everything she could and clung to Astro for 3 hours, keeping his head above water. The horse was in a panic, and the sudden movements made him sink faster. The water was rising at an astonishing speed, and Nicole yelled at Paris for help. Nicole knew there was a good chance she would end up in the mud too, but she couldn't abandon Astro. Their car wasn't far away, and Nicole knew Paris would call for help. Nicole struggled to try to calm Astro and also keep the animal's head above water. If the tide rose, they'd both be finished. It was scary. It was so painful to see my horse exhausted and struggling. We went straight down. There was mud everywhere, and every time I moved, it would suck me back down. We couldn't get out. She recounted the incident to a local newspaper a few days later and revealed that she still had nightmares about it. It felt like an eternity before the rescue team arrived. Nicole later learned it was 3 hours. She says it was the most exhausting 3 hours of her life. When the rescue team showed up, she thought she was going to pass out from terror and exhaustion. The saviors took control and managed to get Astro and her out of the mud. The first thing Nicole did was hug her daughter and make sure the smaller horse was okay. She wouldn't forgive herself if something happened to either of them. Nicole felt incredibly guilty because she was the one who chose the path. She owned over 10 horses and ran an equine dentistry business. She knew her horses well and said she'd never seen more terrified horses in her entire life. "I've been riding here for 20 years and I've never had a problem. I never saw any signs and didn't realize it was so swampy. When I saw the dust from the rescue trucks, I felt very relieved. I was starting to get overwhelmed. One of her saviors was Fire Lieutenant Roger Buckle. He had participated in many rescues over the years, but he'd rarely seen such chaos and panic. The moment he arrived at the scene, he knew he didn't have much time. He had to think fast because it was like quicksand. In addition to the fire crew, there was a local farmer who brought a tractor. They were also assisted by a veterinary team. It was far from an easy rescue. The firemen thought they knew how to rescue the horses and started with hoses and a winch. However, this was unsuccessful, which did not give them much hope. This rescue would be more complicated than they thought. They put a local helicopter on hold, but it was really a last resort. However, when their initial efforts failed, they knew this was their only chance to get Astro out of the mud. It was a success, but it was close. The fire chief told the press that if they had waited another minute, the horse would have been under the mud forever. Part of the reason Astro was safe was because of the backup that had arrived. Stacy Sullivan was able to sedate the horse and keep it from struggling further. "It was a race against the tide, and luckily we won," said Lieutenant Buckle. He praised everyone's hard work and the rescue was a success. It was rare for such a team to have to work together, and they managed it very well given the stressful circumstances. After the rescue, Astro underwent a thorough examination by the veterinary team. Sullivan said he was dehydrated but coped well with the whole experience. Many horses don't survive, and I think without his owner there, the chance of survival would have been much less, Sullivan said. Nicole was extremely grateful in his disbelief that somehow they had all managed to survive. She said it seemed impossible, especially in the hours past. Her daughter, Paris, said she'd never been so afraid in her life. The drive back to the car and the phone calls seemed endless. When she got there, Paris realized that she didn't know which person to call. She'd never been in such a situation and generally trusted her mother to save everyone if something went wrong. When she finally managed to figure out who to call, they had to scramble to find the right people to form such an extraordinary team. After the rescue, Astro was retired from the show circuit. He was an amazing horse, but that much stress would affect anyone, let alone an 18-year-old horse. Nicole decided that Astro would remain at the farm for the rest of his days. They'd been through a lot together, and she knew she would always take care of him. Astro seems quite happy with his retirement and enjoys running in the field with the other horses. He still trusts Nicole and is happy when she uses him in demonstrations for her equestrian dental work. After such a traumatic event, the pair seem to have an unshakable bond. Nicole says that business actually increased as people found out from press how much she loves her animals. She and Paris still go for walks in the mud, although they're much more careful these days. Now they always travel with their cell phones and always make an emergency plan in case something goes wrong. They're careful to let other people know where they are, and so far have not encountered any other problems. Paris was left with some trauma from horseback riding, and she still avoids the mud as much as she can. She doesn't have as much riding experience as her mother, but she helps out in the horse business whenever she can. The two are very grateful to their rescuers, including the veterinary team, for making sure all four were out of harm's way. Paris's horse is still on the show circuit and appears to have fully recovered from the traumatic event. Since the accident, local authorities have also taken care to isolate exceptionally muddy areas and ensure that people are aware of the dangers that can come from the deep mud. Unfortunately, there have been a few similar accidents since that episode. Wild animals sank into the quicksand and were not rescued, and many animal rights groups also work to isolate highly dangerous areas. Do you know the story of an extraordinary rescue, whether of an animal or a human? Share with us below. You never know when your amazing story will become our next inspirational video. Until next time, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you soon.